After such a rousing introduction, I can hardly wait to hear what I have to say. Yes, Esther. I think they may hear it better without it. Thank you anyway. Megillah Esther provides us with a window as to how to study Tanakh. If we look at Tanakh, we see a whole bunch of stories. And we see essays, words of the prophets, we see predictions, we see political assessments. But to a certain extent, that is not the view that Chazal wanted us to have when we study Tanakh. The Torah itself describes itself at the beginning, Sefer Toldos Odom. This is the book of human beings. If you want to have any sort of perspective on the past and on the future, you have to realize that you're dealing with human beings. And human beings make mistakes. They're not infallible. Except for rabbis, they're not perfect. The book of human beings. All the great events that are described in the Torah were events that occurred to human beings. And the Torah tells us the reaction of human beings to these events. So even though there is a general governing rule that heaven ordains what happens here, we are not mere pawns. Human beings create history. The Rambam in the Moreh posits that Hashgacha creates opportunities, creates situations. What happens with those situations or with those opportunities depends on how human beings react to it. If they react one way, so then that's the course of history. If they react another way, then that's the course of history. We see that by Mamad Har Sinai. We all know the Medrash, the Gemara, at Kof Aleim Har Kigigis. The Rebbeinu Shalom hung the mountain over their head, and he said, "This is it. You want it or not?" So the Gemara in Megillah teaches us that the acceptance of the Torah, Nasev and Ishma, at Har Sinai was imperfect. It was forced. Rava says, "Mikan modo rabba l'raisa." Here's a great escape clause. The Rebbeinu Shalom will ask the Jewish people, "Why didn't you observe Shabbos? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that?" We'd say, "We never agreed to it." They'll say, "You did agree. You said Nasev and Ishma." They said you had a gun to our head. There is a complicated halachic issue in the Gemara Baba Basra, Lalu V'Zovid. The mafia comes to you. The mafia has different forms. The mafia comes to you and says, I like your apartment. I would like to buy your apartment. I want you to sell it to me. The person is afraid, so he sells it. We're not talking about selling it at a ridiculously low price. He sells it at market value. The mafia tells you, I'll pay you what the assessor says it's worth. I don't want to sell it to you. I like my apartment. But if you have a gun to my head, I sell it to you. Sign all the documents. A few years later, the mafia guy gets killed, as they all do eventually. So I come to Besdin and I say, I want my apartment back. I never meant it. I only sold under coercion. What is the halacha? So the halacha is klov is ovin, zvina is zvina. A sale is a sale. The Gemara's logic is impeccable. Anyone that sells anything is doing it under some sort of coercion. I'm selling it because I need the money. I'm selling it because I have to support my son-in-law. There's always an element of coercion in sales. I'm selling it because I can buy another one bigger or better for less. So therefore, a forced sale is a sale. So is a forced acceptance of the Torah. In other words, did the Rabboni Shalom make a sale with us? He hung the mountain over the head. He said, you want the Torah? Good. If you don't want it, I'm going to let gravity take over. So we said, Na'aseh v'nishma, right? Don't give us one, give us two. But in our hearts, we say it's a forced sale. The seller always has regrets because the seller always feels, if I would have had all the money in the world, I never would sell my apartment. Why would I sell it? So therefore, Rova says, Mikan mudo rabol oraisa. This is an excuse the Jewish people have throughout the ages. We don't observe the Torah as we should because we really didn't mean it. We never really committed to it. Sure, it's a sale, etc. But in my heart's heart, I'm not happy with it. So the Gemara Megillah says that the real acceptance of the Torah was at Purim. Kimu v'kiblu ha'Yehudi malei ba'al zaron ba'al kol hanilveh maleim. Then they accepted it willingly. So I've always been troubled by that. Why was it willing? Where do we see willingly by Purim? Purim, the Jewish people are threatened with extinction. So they fight a war of survival. They kill tens of thousands of their enemies. Does that make them accept the Torah? I don't know how many evil people we have killed over the past 15 months, but we don't notice a great uptick in loyalty to Torah. One thing has nothing to do with the other. So what does it mean? Kimu v'kiblu, that they accepted the Torah now willingly. There's no seller's remorse here. There's no second thoughts. And therefore, this is an eternal covenant with God. So as I prepared for this great lecture, about 20 minutes ago, I thought as follows. The Jewish people, both individually and nationally, have always had an opinion that somehow we're going to persevere. Our reaction to every tragedy is never again. Okay. But all of history teaches us that it's again and again and again. What do you mean, never again? You really think so? So Purim created a realization within the Jewish nation that they are eternally on the precipice. They are once, in America, they used to say that democracy is one generation away from extinction. We could say the Jewish people are one generation away from, God forbid, extinction. And we see clearly how it can happen. So you have to have all sorts of forces that we do not control that somehow allow us to exist. Depends who the president of the United States is, depends what the armaments are, depends on strategy, depends on the sacrifice that the Jewish nation is willing to expend. But there's no guarantee. And that's why the introduction to Purim is Parsha Zohar. Zohar is a Sherot Salafa Amalek. Remember what I have to remember. Amalek is long gone. He has many years, but Amalek is gone. What do you have to remember? Amalek. Because that's a reminder that we're one generation away from extinction. Amalek is never gone. Milchama Hashem ba'Amalek midor dor. So Purim taught the Jewish people that lesson, that you shouldn't expect differently. That's why it says in the Megillah, "B'yimei Purim ha'elu lo yavru mitoch hayudim u'mitoch zaro." The days of Purim never disappear. The rabbis say all the holidays will disappear, but Purim will never. What does that mean? That's what it means. It means the United Nations. It means Columbia University. It's always here. So if that is the given situation, so then the question is, is our reaction? So Purim tells us the reaction basically of one Jew, Mordechai. Mordechai is not a popular figure. God forbid, he probably was a Haredi. Mordechai lo yichra v'lo yishlach. The Medrash says, well, the Jews said to him, what are you doing? You're endangering us. There's a heter from great Rabbanim. You can do it. Forget it. What? You're a madman. And then there's Esther. So you imagine that a Beis Yaakov girl is taken to become the consort of a dissolute Gentile king. And she's living in captivity. She can't talk to him unless he stretches forth his scepter. He's got a harem full of women. He doesn't need her. One can hardly think of a more miserable life. So the Rebbe Shalom in the Megillah, he does not appear. His name doesn't appear. Wants to see what the reaction of the people. What is Esther going to do? What is Mordechai going to do? Based upon their reaction, so then heaven will do what heaven has to do. But at the end of the story, the Jewish people have to fight a war. They have to kill thousands of their enemies. Well, what if they didn't fight the war? And I'm sure there were calls then not to fight the war too. It's it will come to a settlement. They'll revoke the decree, and it'll be all right. What's the reaction? And that's what the Megillah means when it says, every day by us is Purim. Every day is, how do we prevent falling off the precipice? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And how not to be distracted by all the noise, the cacophony of sound that surrounds us. Baruch Hashem, I live here. Every night, almost, I have a demonstration outside my window. Noise, drums, this, shouts. The Lord is heard with a still small voice. And that's our inner voice. What do I say to, am I a better person? Am I stronger in my faith? Am I more optimistic? What do I want for my descendants? Because you should know you can never leave them enough money. There never is enough. That was the downfall of Haman. The Gemara says, Haman min haTorah min ayin. Where do we see Haman in the Torah? Because by the Eitz Hadas, the tree of knowledge, it says, Hamino eitz. Did you eat from the fruit? So Hamin is Hey Mem Nun, and Haman is Hey Mem Nun. So that's a pretty superficial way to look at it. What the rabbis meant there clearly, Adam Arishon is in the Garden of Eden. Everything is open for him. Whatever you want to eat. It's perfect. It's Florida in February. Just don't eat from this tree. Oh, that's the tree I want to eat from. That's the one. Haman says to his wife, you see, the king appointed me. Look at all of our wealth. Look at the portfolio. Look at our family. Look at my power. Look at everything I have. But it's not worth anything because there's one little Jew that will bow down to me. That's human beings. That's what leads to his downfall. So the Megillah wants us to be aware of that, to be aware of the important lessons, and to see ourselves within the Megillah. What is our reaction? I remember I had a conversation last night with friends of mine. So I recalled that when I became the rabbi in Miami Beach, there were only 39 families in the synagogue. And I was elected by the overwhelming majority of 20 to 19. So like 10 years later, when I was still a rabbi in the shul, and the shul had grown enormously, we were 250 families in a building with the whole shebang. So somebody came over to me and he said, would you like to know who were the 19 people that voted against you? I said, I'm not the least bit interested. I am interested in the 20 people that voted for me. What did they see? What did they think? Have I disappointed them? Did they think they made a mistake? We were always interested in those that voted against us. Should be interested in those that vote for us. Mordechai and Esther voted for us. Therefore, the Megillah wrote about them. So there are many lessons, and we are living through a Purim in our time, an absolute Purim. So we have to strengthen ourselves in that belief and realize that our own individual efforts and trains of thought will determine how the miracle of this Purim will turn out for all of us. So I want to thank you all for coming and have a wonderful and happy Purim.